It would not have been possible to produce all of the sessions and content for Punchback Print and bring you all of this content for free without the help of our amazing sponsors. So without further ado, here is a quick word from one of them.
So the COVID-19 crisis, I believe, has acted as a huge accelerant to change. And this is because supply chains have really struggled to meet this change in demand, and also the restrictions placed upon it by COVID. As a result, according to our COVID-19 and the Future of Inkjet survey, which we did in partnership with RICO, 53% of people expect to see an increase in interest in digital manufacturing, in reshoring of manufacturing, and a decentralization of manufacturing. This is so we are able to meet these changing demands. Nobody wants to be left in a position where they just simply can't get products into stores. Over the top of this, we can also add in the kind of consumer trend for localization. So I think we can see a perfect cocktail for change going forward. And there is some positivity and there is an opportunity in that.
Hello, thank you. So in the next half hour or so, we're going to be going through the value proposition and how we can use that to engage with our customers. Now, to misquote the wonderfully fantastic Robin Williams, language was invented for one reason, boys, to woo customers, and in that endeavour, laziness will not do. And I think one of the hardest points I find with the value proposition is there are so many different tools and techniques, and there is much debate about what is a value proposition. I'm not going to try and be a purist during this session, but I'm just going to show you the different tools and techniques, because in my mind, the fact that anybody spends the time to understand this from the customer's point of view is absolutely the key point. And which tool or technique they use is secondary to me. So I'm going to show you these different tools and techniques, and I want you to use the one that resonates. Please don't think that this is an exercise that needs you to use multiple tools to get to the same destination. And if some of them you go, don't get it, that's okay. Don't use it. So let's start off with a formal definition. What is a value proposition? It's a promise of value to be delivered, communicated, and acknowledged. It's a belief from the customer how value or benefit will be delivered, experienced, and acquired. Or I would say it's the customer acknowledging that you've got a product that they want and are prepared to pay you. Fundamentally, that's all we're trying to do. Now, the challenge we have without using a value proposition is we're operating from what we think the customer should want, and we don't always hit that mark. For those of you who are in the earlier talk, Steve Jobs, that's where the mental slip came. For those of you who are in my earlier talk, Steve Jobs operated without worrying about a value proposition because he was it. But your value proposition has different audiences all the time. So for example, the value proposition you offer your customers is going to be completely different than the value proposition you offer your employees. Both of these are key audiences, and both of them extract value from you. In one case, the customer takes a product and gives you money. In the other case, the employee gives you a product, their labour, and takes your money. But at the same time, you want that employee to be fully engaged with the business, not to see it as a wage, to believe in the higher good and all that sort of stuff. So I would argue you should be using the value proposition approach to making sure that you engage with your employees. And also there's another way of looking at it. There is the value proposition from what the company represents versus the value proposition that a product represents. Now, these should be nested within each other or overlap within each other, but they're not necessarily completely the same. And there's probably a value proposition that the manager represents in the way that they deal with their teams. One thing that is true, a value proposition is not a slogan. These are fantastic slogans. L'Oreal, because you're worth it. And Honda, the power of dreams. But I would argue these are not value propositions because it doesn't tell you what you get across in exchange for your value. I know some people would argue it does because L'Oreal, no, it doesn't. I've changed my mind. It's not an elevator pitch, which is a short description of your company, your product. Your elevator pitch might include your value proposition, but it doesn't need to. It depends on what you're using your value proposition for and what message you want to get across. So, these are the three main elements. Your value proposition has to be relevant to your customer. No use telling your customer normally why your employees are happy to work for you. It has to be real. They have to listen to it and go, I understand that positioning, I know where they're coming from. And more importantly, if you want to start making your customers stickier, you should be able to get across why it's you, not your competitor. We don't want to be in a situation where we're competing on price. We want to be competing on benefits and values and features that justify a price. And that's a big benefit that the value proposition brings to you. So let's start going through a few of these simple templates. Neil Rackman believes a value proposition has four main elements. Capability, what you offer, how you change or more impact, the evidence, and the cost to the customer, the value. If you explain those four things to a potential customer, you've given them everything that they need to make a decision. Now, this highlights one of the difficulties with a value proposition. It's quite a logical focused model, the way I looked at it, and that isn't always the right tool at the right time. And the reason why I say that is not everybody is a logical person that makes all their decisions based on facts. So don't overread it, and that can be part of the problems you have with these things. This is another simple template which I love. For your target customers who are dissatisfied with the current solution, our product is that provides these benefits unlike the product alternative. Now, I have a little personal hang-up over unlike the product alternative. I think that in places like America that have negative advertising on their television, unlike the alternative will resonate. I think in the UK and Europe, negative advertising is frowned upon and doesn't always work. So I would be hesitant over using that negative alternative. But the rest of that sentence works well. For our customers who have this problem, we've got this for them, and this is how it fixes it. That would resonate and work really well. Another way of re-expressing that, which some people find easier to go, is you go customer, problem, solution. Let's see that for real. I believe my best customers are SMEs who cannot measure their campaign return on investment because it's too expensive, too complicated, and just get a load of charts. So I offer them a low-cost, easy-to-deploy analytics system designed for non-technical marketeers who need actionable metrics. This sort of value proposition is a bit of an internal document. I would argue that's not terribly inspiring if you was to look at it from a copy point of view, but it's extremely useful. So don't think, like the elevator pitch we said a little bit earlier on, that your value proposition has to be camera-ready, client-facing. It's completely acceptable for it to be a tool that drives the rest of your messaging, not replacing the rest of your messaging. I love this beautiful. We help X do Y for Z. We help non-technical marketeers discover return on investment in social media by turning engagement metrics into revenue metrics. Now that has probably been built from something like this. I've not aligned my cases up very well, where you take that and then try and make it something that is a bit more client-facing, but you can see how this is possibly paragraph 2 or 3 of any marketing material that you're trying to do. People in one paragraph can see why it's you. So where else do we get this information? The value proposition canvas from Strategizer, point your camera at the 2D barcode to go to the website, free downloadable tool, helps you build it up. You can start anywhere, but normally you start from the customer and you sort of say, what are the pain points? What are the benefits of using this product? What is it the customer's trying to do with the customer jobs? And you map that across to your product. What product are we using to help the customer do that job? What pain are we getting rid of? How are we getting rid of that pain? What gain are we giving them? So the pain might be, we want to ensure that we are warm in winter. The pain relief will be a warm jacket, and you're sort of marrying up the features like that. If you're not used to the business model canvas, I would urge you to go and have a look at it. This is a simple one-page description of your organisation. 9 boxes. On one side, 5, 6, 7, it's about your customer. On the other side, 1, 2, 3, it's how you make stuff for your customer. In the middle, number 9, it's how you explain it to your customer, and at the bottom is the cost. So let's go through it in a little bit more detail. Let's start off with the customers, because I'm a great believer in customer first. We want customer-centric innovation, not technology push. Technology push has its place, and then you use this in a slightly different way. But let's start off with the customer approach. Look at the different customers, this is box 7. Look at the different customers that we're trying to engage with, and try and categorise them, try and group them in. Then think, what sort of relationship, box 5, do we have with this? What are we offering them? How do we reach with them? Number 6, how do we find them? How are we going to maintain that relationship? Customer described. Now look at what we do. What do we make? Number 1. What do we need to make it? Equipment, resources, etc. Number 2. Who is in our supply chain? Number 3. Then we build up the value proposition to link the two using the previous template. And also we look at what it costs us to make, number 8, and we hope that it's less than what it costs, what we get by selling it, number 9. If you've got a new product, you can use the same technique as well as a company, and I would urge you to probably spend anywhere from half an hour to half a day on this. And the most important part for me is I use this as a map of ignorance. The actual answers are often secondary, but if you look at this and you normally put it on a wall in a post-it note exercise, and you see that number 5 is empty and everything else is splattered with post-it notes, the biggest learning you're taking today from that exercise is you don't understand your customer relationships, and the next thing you should be doing is getting more insight to that. So I often describe this as a map of ignorance as much as anything, because ignorance is often what brings us down. Now let's start looking at some copy templates that we might use, say, for our website, based on your value proposition. And this very standard approach says, headline. Then we go for the paragraph version, and then we chuck in some bullets. Here's an example of a website. I'd argue, build a pillow that fits you. It's getting across so much in one sentence, isn't it? It's not just a pillow, but it's the pillow that resonates with you and it's worth it for you. Trello follows the example a lot better. So it's giving you that headline, and then it gives you the detail, and then there's a classic call to action. A lot of us use websites and we don't think about how it should be engaging with our prospective customers, and these are some tools and techniques to help us. And then this template you can use to build it. In the example they've gone down. I actually prefer to go upwards and use summary. But if you've got a fantastic tagline and that resonates, there's nothing wrong with building it underneath. But normally I build from the ground up. That might just be me and my approach. So, what are the 3 things that make a great value proposition? It connects with your audience, with your brand values. It's concise, it's clear, it's easy to digest, and last, and definitely by no means least, it's honest and memorable. For a customer-facing value prop, they are the three things that you need to sort out. Get them sorted, you should be able to hook your customer. Before I forget, folks, do throw questions in the chat window as we go along. I'm more than happy to take them as we go along. So then you end up with this 6-step process. Clarify what the heart of your brand is. Who else are your competitors? Who are the different personas that you're going to adapt against each of those audiences that you've identified? Brainstorm what benefits you bring and start customizing it. Do a rough version and then perfect it. I'm a great believer in early engagement with the marketplace to sanity test your ideas as soon as possible. I call it agile thinking. So what are your brand values about? You want to know why you exist. What is the future you want to create? And what does that future look like? Why are you here? How are you going to do it? And what are the values that are going to guide your behaviours? I find all too often that small companies struggle with putting the time into this, and they stay highly agile, highly responsive. Often that's great. It's opportunity spotting, and it will win bills. But using this approach, it becomes much more structured, and it helps you to figure out who else you should be reaching to. And so that's why I would urge you to do that. So, I had a question come in from one of the audience. How long would you allow for this process? And would you engage with any external parties to work with you? I'm going to answer the first question first. Yes, I use somebody to help me build the brand values and the value proposition for Anchored In. And the reason why I'm using somebody external is I need that critical friend. I need somebody to ask me the questions that I might be consciously or subconsciously forgetting. And we allocate 2 hours every month with them on a call, catching up. Then between every call, they give us some worksheets for us to work on, and to put it all in context, created the company in April this year. So it's the approach we're taking is doing this half a day check-in every month and seeing what resonates with the customers. And like one big example that I've brought out of that in the 3 months that I've been doing it since April is how to change my business model to connect with my customers. And so I've moved much more to a freemium model, because that's resonating with the companies I'm trying to help. Because I learnt by going through the process that fundamentally I was a nobody, and I say that in the most respectful way to myself. And so our customers or prospective customers didn't want to trust us. By moving to this freemium model where we engage with a company for an hour free every 3 months, I'm already finding that people are coming into the first call and moving forward because they understand what they're getting. The second question, which is related, is if you're an SME print business, should you bring the team with you? And I would say yes. And the reason why I say that is the alternative is you're suggesting that you're a small company and you've got people who are there just for the wage. And I find that really difficult to believe. All the small companies that I've worked with, the best ones at least, everybody's been there together. They see what the future work is about and they see why they want to get there. Even if it's only for the very selfish reason they want to have a job in a few weeks' time. Often it isn't for that selfish reason. Often it's because you're working with these people, you're spending more time awake with these people than you do with most of your family members. And so I find that if you bring the team in from the beginning, ask them for their opinions, get them to make suggestions, you get a lot more out of them, and you're much more likely to have a better understanding of your customers in the round than what you have by yourself. So I would definitely bring the whole team with me. It's often important, it's vitally important you understand how you're different. And your competitors are it's a very, very broad question. It's not just your direct competitors, but it's your indirect. What are they doing instead of print, for example, as well as the other people they could go to be printed with? And you want to explain why you're better to them and why they should be choosing you. And it needs you to spend quite a bit of time putting the effort into this question. Brand personas are a fantastic way of understanding what your different customers are about, and it's where you do pen pictures and rough descriptions, and you sort of say Sam does this and this is what they want, and you try to make that group, that category of people as real as possible, because you engage with their problems better and you end up with a more rounded and robust solution at the end of it. So if you've not come across the idea of doing brand personas, it's definitely worth spending a little bit of time of getting your head around what a brand persona is and who your brand personas are. I've also seen people do things like humanize their brand personas in the workplace. So the very negative example was I was once working with Asda, which is owned by Walmart, and I was supplying IT equipment for them, so I had to put some IT equipment back of house. And as you came out of the staff restroom, they had this mannequin dressed somehow in Tesco's uniform. I've no idea how they got the Tesco's uniform. And it was posing there, and they put a card around the neck on the model, sort of saying, know your enemy. I don't think that's a particularly good use of brand personas, but it was certainly very powerful. To the more positive end, where I've seen companies literally buy the shoes of their first customers in a new product segment, put it on the wall and have a picture of the customer next to them, explaining why that customer chose you as a supplier. I think that's a much better use of personas than perhaps the Walmart approach that I saw when I was back of house for them once. When you're doing this different types of brainstorming, you have to think as broad as possible. You want to be engaging both in the functional elements of what you supply, the technical elements, but don't forget the emotional elements of what you supply. People purchase from people at the end of the day, and emotions kick into the relationships much more often than you think. So do think across all the different elements and don't be afraid to put the ideas down on the wall. Then take all of this and translate it into some rough copy, but don't worry about it being perfect. Make sure it follows your brand values, and then you're going to go out there and do some A/B testing and see how the world reacts. Okay, so when you're doing the A/B testing, don't forget things like Google Ads give you the option to do A/B testing. And if you're doing real product testing, Amazon is a fantastic way of exploring your price points, because you can put stuff up, you can set price points, you can turn it on, you can turn it off. But it is also fantastically good for reaching out into new geographical markets, other countries, because you can supply from the UK, you pay additional shipping, of course, but you can supply from the UK and you just see the additional shipping as part of your market engagement costs. It's also important to know when it's time to stop playing with the details and to carry on moving forward and to concentrate on reaching out to people. CXL Research did a fantastic study into websites, and I found the results counterintuitive. What they found was people don't engage as much with simplistic websites, and there has definitely been a trend over the last few years to make websites more like billboards, more like advertising things, big picture, few words. But they went through the research of these websites and they used eye trackers, and what they found was that when a website had text, they actually read it, and when they had bulleted lists, they read even more of it. But it wasn't briefity of text that got them to read it. The customer was obviously digesting and rereading and engaging more with it. Now that's really counterintuitive to me, because I'm a great believer in simplicity is king. So that should be some research that's worth engaging with. This is a paid-for service that you can engage with, and what they do is they take your website and they get 20 people to give reviews over how they engaged with it, and you can see here, so it's like 240 for people to read a page. It's kind of expensive, I would argue, but I think it's probably worth it because it's going to give you stuff that you wouldn't get otherwise. You want to reach out to your circle that isn't your circle, and get their views on board. And they also have a much lower cost value proposition where you can sort of say, look, this is the value proposition. What do you think about it? Does it resonate? We've touched upon this earlier on, but have an inner circle of people that you trust and start bringing your customers in earlier. Build up those relationships. I know one company, for example, keeps on bringing his customers right at the product brainstorming idea stage, and he's now got to the stage where his customers are beginning to contribute financially to the innovations that are turning up by helping to do the research, because they're beginning to believe in his output. So I would urge you to be building those long-term relationships so you're not competing on price and you're doing it as a co-discovery journey. I think number one can be a bit of a difficult one, can't it? We always get quite upset about the idea of losing customers, but I think sometimes you have to accept that some customers aren't really the right profile for you and you're better off letting them walk away. You want to manage it so it's done in a good way, so they don't feel like they've been ditched. But I know from my side there's some companies that I don't want to work with because they soak up too much time and resource. It's all about how you differentiate yourself. What's you, what makes you special, and do it in that simple way that people can remember. And finally, think about the connections. You want people to resonate with human beings and you want to keep that real. As I said a bit earlier on, actually, one of the great things at the moment is people are responding to people reaching out to them. I don't know if it's a general anxiety and worry about COVID and what that's bringing, but in my experience, I'm finding that LinkedIn messages are being answered quite well, and telephone calls are being answered really quite well, and emails are still being ignored. So think hard how you engage with people. Are there other ways of getting through to them? That brings us to what I wanted to speak about mainly this morning. I have a little few more slides about how to do a good 30-second pitch, which I can spend 5 minutes on if people want, but I'm just going to pause and see if there's any questions. I'll just grab a mouthful of water while I'm doing it. So, questions? Do take a snap of the picture, connect with me on LinkedIn if you want to. So somebody said, which process did we use? Great question. We went for the persona approach. Yeah, for the value prop. We went for the persona approach. We started describing what our customers were, and that's when we realized that they weren't trusting strangers. Quite rightly, we tell our children not to trust strangers, don't we? So, and because they weren't trusting us, how do we end up engaging with them so it felt safe? And that's why we ended up using this freemium model. And I also preferred the really easy one. I'm a great believer in simplicity. I use that one to understand what the problem is. And then that was a template I used the most. Is there a specific process you would suggest for the print industry? I don't think the print industry needs a specific process. And the reason why I'm saying that is I think there are some commonalities with the rest of industry, is that it's understanding what your customer wants. And so it's building that relationship with your customer. I don't think the technology of printing is different than any other technology and the problems it brings. So I don't think there needs to be a specific process for the print industry. So what I'm going to do now for the next probably 5 minutes at the most is take you through the 30-second pitch. And you might find this useful when you're reaching out to people, helping to explain to them what you're about. 5 simple steps. Now I want you to imagine that this is for a formal networking event where you've got a classic 30 seconds. You can use the same technique if you're speaking to somebody, say on a telephone or a Zoom or at a Cheese and Wine, but please do not deliver it straight as 30 seconds. What you want to do is sort of chop and paste it and have a two-way dialogue. The 5 steps are: grab attention. Often if I was to introduce somebody on a stage, the first thing they'll say is, "Hi, my name's Colin." After I've just said, "Next up is Colin to speak." And we've been brought up to answer questions from when we were quite small, so I find facts or questions help. Over half of company owners feel overwhelmed, 1/3 have lost money from this, Is this you? If so, you need to listen. So you're waking up the audience. Then you're filtering your audience, because what happens now is if you had a room of 50 people and 10 are your target audience, by putting in a bit of a filter, they begin to listen. Then we throw in some credibility, because now they want to know why they should believe you. So in the last 5 years, I've helped companies raise millions in grants and much more in investment. And then we give them a call to action. And you put it all together, and at the end, right at the end, if they're still listening, you bother to tell them who you are and how to find you. You put that together, and that is 30 seconds worth of speech. I just wanted to share that with you. As I said, if you're using it in a one-to-one conversation, make it a conversation and not a broadcast. That gets really annoying. And that actually brings us to the end of our time this morning. Again, we're back for questions. If you want a copy of the slides or anything, reach out to me on LinkedIn and I'll happily share them with you.